There's just a lot of bad information out there that makes it very difficult for people to make a good decision. But one of the things that inevitably happens is students chase after certificates from different programs. The universities are much more interested in someone who shows an ability to grow and learn quickly. People admit portfolios and not transcripts. The goal is to be successful at the college you go to and position yourself for success in life beyond college. Start earlier than you think you should, focus later than you think you should. And if you do that, even if you do nothing else, you will have a much greater chance of success.
Hello, I'm Sumya Yasmin, Managing Editor, EducationWorld. It's that time of the year when a small but growing number of school leavers across the country are researching and weighing up their options for studying abroad. It is one of the most important education investment decisions families will make. While doing this, they have to balance several factors, including affordability, academic reputation, college, course fit, university rankings, and the very real question of whether they'll be able to thrive in a new environment thousands of miles away from home. And the US, the United States of America, despite some recent visa restrictions on international students, continues to be the #1 favorite foreign higher education destination of Indian students. Last year, India surpassed China to become America's top source country for international students, with over 3.6 lakh ambitious youth enrolling in US institutions for higher education. To answer questions about all of this and bust some popular myths about undergrad admissions, planning, and decision making, especially to American universities, we have a very special guest with us today, Raymond Ravaglia. He's the former dean and director of Stanford University Pre-Collegiate Studies and the founder of the Stanford Online High School and Dwight Global Online School. He's also co-founder of AccessUSA and Launchpad Rankings LLC, which last year for the first time released its annual rankings of America's best undergrad education university rankings 2026 in association with EducationWorld. Welcome, Ray.
Sumia, it's a great pleasure to be here. And you're absolutely right that this is a time of year where families are needing to make decisions. And the problem is that so much of the information that they have in front of them, whether it's existing rankings or it's the myths and pressures coming from family and friends, there's just a lot of bad information out there that makes it very difficult for people to make a good decision. And that is been a primary motivation behind creating the Launchpad rankings.
So according to you, Ray, I mean, there's a lot of obsession about, cut-off percentages, standardized test scores. How do you strategize also around extracurricular activities? A lot of students and their parents also pore over university league table rankings. What, according to you, are the common mistakes school leavers make and their parents while applying to undergrad programs of foreign universities?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest problems is, so Indian families understandably are obsessed with the boards and board exam results and which board you're taking. And the reality is that American universities pay very little attention to the boards. I mean, the typical admissions office couldn't tell you the difference between ICGSE and CBSE and any of these things. They are not looking at board exam results. They're not looking at any particular test result. Everything has been built up over the last 20 to 30 years around a concept of holistic admissions, meaning that there is no one particular thing that they're going to look at. Rather, they're trying to gain an understanding of the student as a whole. And for this reason, it's not just about producing a perfect transcript. It's not about producing perfect board results. It's about showing universities that you're the type of student who will thrive on their campus. So that this becomes simultaneously easier because there's no pressure on any particular thing, and more difficult because there's no simple formula that you can follow. But one of the things that inevitably happens is students chase after certificates from different programs. And the thought is, if I do a bunch of different programs and I collect a giant stack of certificates, that's going to mean something. And it's not, because what the universities are looking for is depth. They want to see evidence that a student is willing to go outside of what is regularly available to them in school. So they want some evidence that you're seeking out opportunity. And this is why you cannot just do narrowly what your school offers. You always need to go beyond your school, because they want to see that you have the kind of personality that seeks out opportunity. That said, they want you to be somebody who also shows focus. And if you are running from place to place to place, that shows that your brain is scattered rather than focused. They would rather see you identify 3 or 4 things, try them out, take 2 or 3 of those, develop them more deeply, show an ability to concentrate and really sort of narrow in on your interests. And so, a stack of certificates might look nice as a pile of things in front of you. But again, American universities, when they're reviewing a student, they're not looking for a stack of certificates. The other thing people often overlook is the importance of letters of recommendation. And for a letter of recommendation, it needs to be more important than who it's from is how well that person knows you. So if you're just one of 200 students getting a letter of recommendation from, so you have someone famous who comes and visits your school and they teach a course for 3 days and 200 students get letters of recommendation. And the person writing the letter basically says, I don't know this kid. He was in my class for a few days. He seems smart. That's not going to mean anything at all. Much better to find a teacher who really knows you, who can really write about your ability and also your growth over the past few years. The universities are much more interested in someone who shows an ability to grow and learn quickly than to see how much you've achieved so far, because it is all about the future growth that they're after. So, these are the things that are hard for parents to appreciate, that it's not just about running around and picking up. It's not like a scavenger hunt where you have been given a program and you need to visit 24 booths at the fair and get each booth to punch your ticket. You really need to show some focus, depth, build meaningful relationships. So, this is on the side of building a profile. On the flip side, in terms of picking an institution, if you just look at a league table, well, there are probably 15 to 20 different rankings in the US right now that reflect different things. So US News and World Report is one of the oldest rankings. A lot of what they have are surveys where they ask different university presidents which universities they find most interesting. They factor in things like the size of the university endowment. They factor in things like maybe involving sports teams, different elements that are not necessarily relevant to the quality of education your child will receive. Or if you look at something like QS rankings, they want it to be very mathematical. And so one of the things they will look at are the citation indices to see how many papers are the professors publishing and how often are those papers being cited. Well, this might be something important if you're looking for very cutting edge research that you're going to be engaged in. But most students, this is not relevant to them as an undergraduate. This might be relevant for graduate school. This might be relevant if you're a professor looking for which department to join. But what you need is to see, is the university you're going to something that's actually dedicated to teaching and developing the capabilities of your students. A very nice way that I've seen this phrased is people sometimes become obsessed with the admission selectivity of a university. 2 things that people should know. 1, just because a university is very hard to get into doesn't mean that once you're there, they will work very hard to educate you. Oftentimes, they have no interest in educating you at all. It's just they're focused on their research and it's hard to get into because everyone is applying. So you really need to look beyond that surface. The other thing people don't understand is that there have been some fairly detailed studies now that show there's absolutely no correlation between future earnings and university admission selectivity. There is much more correlation between what you study, but admission selectivity is not very significant. A great, I'm just going to keep rambling for a moment, but Code Signal, which is a US company, and the CEO of Code Signal is part of the advisory board for the Launchpad rankings. If you look at Code Signal, one of the things that they do are technical interviews. So students applying for jobs in tech firms will have to go through a technical interview process where they're assessed for their depth of knowledge about programming and other sort of technical aspects of working. So they administer thousands of exams to graduates from hundreds of universities, and they publish an annual ranking of universities based on how well their students do on those exams. And the results are very different than looking at typical admission selectivity and places that people are going. In fact, in this last year, the second highest performer as far as looking at the technical interview results from Code Signal, the second highest performer was San Jose State University. So just a governmental university in California and in the second tier of the governmental universities. So not even something that would be seen as high prestige. But if a university is focused on developing the talents of their students, they will do well in these sorts of exams. Whereas,
what you're talking about rankings and all that, we'll come to that in a bit. But do you think that how early should students start preparing for foreign admissions? Usually they start in like class 11 or 12. And they think this is like, listen, it's a 6-month process. It's like a, not more than that 8-month process. We don't need to devote any more time to that. Is that correct?
No, that is absolutely incorrect. I mean, if you really want to maximize the probability of success there, you need to start thinking about university in grade 7, grade 8. You really need to start very early and look at the sorts of, because again, if you're going to come in with a profile that shows longitudinal development of interests, you can't just suddenly wake up one day in grade 11, because I think a typical problem that you see for Indian families is students will spend all of their time worrying about the grade 10 boards. Now that those are done, now they enter grade 11, they think they have some time to build their profile. But if you have only started doing things like that in grade 11, when the universities look at your record, they're going to see that you're someone who was obsessed with preparing for their boards until grade 10 and then started running around in grade 11, which just shows that you were not planning thoroughly. Much better to start exploring in grades 7 and 8, discerning what your interests might be, figuring out where your talents lie. Grades 9 and 10, you start trying different things. Some of them you keep working on, some of them you stop working on. And this is another thing that's often overlooked, is that an important skill to demonstrate to universities is the ability to prune your interests. When you show up at university, there are an infinite number of opportunities that you can pursue. Unless you have shown the wisdom of understanding when you need to take something that you might even be good at and choose to stop doing it so that you can focus on something else. That kind of pruning and selective focus is very essential for taking advantage of a resource-rich environment. And it is so different than the natural impulse, because these students who are very talented, who are good at many different things, it's hard to stop doing something, especially if it's something you enjoy. But you really need to think through, what are the things you're good at? What are the things you enjoy doing? And what are the things that are going to be well aligned to your future intellectual growth and development? Because, sometimes it may be that you were very interested in being in the band and you enjoy playing your instrument, but it's very time consuming and you're not going to play it at a level that is serious enough to get you university admission based on that activity. So maybe that just becomes something you do for fun and you stop building that into your schedule.
Mm. So you're saying that, that's like something quite amazing that you say you need to start in grade 7 or latest by grade 8. And also in India, there's this obsession about, admission into the Ivy Leagues for undergrad admission. Parents and students in India obsessing about like, either the Ivy Leagues or the highest top ranked universities are going to be the best fit for my child. Is that correct? Is like a highly ranked university a best fit, or a student's aptitude, the course fit is more important?
The course fit is more important, and also too the when you look at the rankings, like so, why are Ivy League schools highly ranked? They're highly ranked because high admission selectivity, large endowments. They're being ranked on the factors that don't actually impact students. Well, things that you need to look at is who's actually teaching your son or daughter when you get there. Are they working with the professors or are they working with graduate students? And if you look at the professors who are working with them, are these professors whose focus is teaching and who want to develop the skills of your child? Or are these professors whose focus is their research and they teach only as a tax on their time so that they can spend the rest of their time doing their research? Anyone who's ever worked with someone who is devoted to their development as opposed to someone who is just doing it out of obligation and hoping that the session ends as quickly as possible will know the difference. I mean, you really need to find places that will pay attention to the fit. Ivy Leagues are, because they've been in movies, because they've been in books, because they've been around so long, they have good reputations. There are many famous people who have attended these schools, but the Ivy League itself is just because that is the name of the sort of athletic region that they are in. These are teams who play each other in sports, fundamentally, is what they have in common. There is no deeper intellectual basis that unifies them. And it is more a sign of branding that they have emerged with the reputations they have than a sign of the actual quality. And again, when you look at the outcome results, it's, you will see a lot of people who go to Ivy League schools being successful economically, but that is usually a factor of their parents being successful economically and having close connections, and not because the university has really contributed value add to that student's intellectual development. So, if you're someone whose family is already rich and well connected, Ivy Leagues might be a good choice. If you're a family who's actually making an investment in hoping your child is going to move up to a higher economic rung, then you should not be looking at Ivy League. You should be looking at the universities that are actually good at developing students' economics.
So how did Ray, for you, personally, this idea that, the rankings, the established rankings are getting it all wrong? And what are the true parameters which define excellent undergrad education? How did that realization come to you? And how was that the beginning point of the Launchpad rankings?
Yeah.
If you could take us a bit through the thought process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question. I mean, so I was at Stanford for 27 years. And during that time, I saw any number of students come through my summer programs, which were for pre-college students. I saw any number of students come through who they were good students, they were smart, they were willing to work hard. And when you asked them where they wanted to go to university, all they could think of was Stanford or Ivy, maybe a big, large state school. And I would look at these students and I'd realize, well, maybe someday for graduate school, a place like that could be a good fit. But right now, you're good, but you're not ready for that environment. That is not going to be the best way to develop your talent. Especially a lot of these students were coming from small private high schools that were very high touch, where people were very invested in their education. And to go from that kind of environment to an environment where people don't care about your education was not going to be a good transition. So I started to think, like, okay, how do you change that perspective? What should people really be looking at? And as I thought about that and looked at the current rankings, I realized that there's sort of four things that really stand out when evaluating schools, and these became the basis for the Launchpad rankings. And the things that stand out, first and foremost, are who is teaching your child? You're sending them to the university. Who is actually going to be teaching them? Are they going to be the professors who the university is fully invested in and who in some sense are helping to shape the culture? Or are they going to be graduate students, part-time instructors, people who are brought in to handle the teaching because the serious faculty wants to spend their time doing research? So that was the first question, is who will actually be teaching your students? The second question was, how large are the classes? Because even if it is a good person teaching the class, if there are 150 students in the classroom, your child will not get to know that professor. So the thought was, you want real professors teaching the students. You want small class sizes so the students can get to know the professors, because that mentoring relationship that happens outside of the core academics of the class, that is going to be essential for the development of the student. They need to make those personal relationships. The professor needs to understand them as a person and give them advice. That kind of relationship is essential, and that is only going to happen in an environment where there are small classes and where there's a priority being placed on the teaching. The other things that stood out, one is, are the students actually going to have any experience that aligns with future employment? Because it is easy to go to a university and spend all your time learning about stuff, and then when you graduate, you'll have no idea what to do next. So unless there are required internship programs, or ideally co-op programs where students are going to companies, seeing what the work is like that they are studying for, really developing those connections into industry, they're not going to be well prepared when they graduate to enter the workforce. And this is the challenge, because so many good students, I always say to the parents, look, your children are really good students. And when they go to university, they will do really well as students. And if there was a job called professional student, they would be very well prepared for success in that job. But there is no such job. At some point, they will need to stop being students and start doing something else. And when will that transition happen? If you wait until they are done with education, it is going to be too late. They need to start that transition sooner. In the same way you need to start worrying about university when you are in 7th or 8th grade, you need to start worrying about your job the moment you get to university. Even ideally in high school, you begin to gain a sense for why you're going to university. What is the studying for? Then the fourth element that was very important is, does this actually have a positive economic impact on the student? So what is the likelihood that they are going to be better off economically after they've gone to this college or university than if they've gone somewhere else? Because again, this is an investment. An investment needs to have a return on investment. Is there a measurable ROI for what the families are paying? And so those four elements, what is the ROI? Are the students going to be gaining industry experience? Are they going to be working with real faculty? Are they going to be in small classes? Struck me as the four most important things. And then the fifth element we added for the Launchpad rankings was just sort of a check on those four, because no matter how good all of that is, if students leave in high numbers after their first year, there's probably something that isn't quite right. So that was the fifth element, is what's the retention rate? How likely are students to come back for a second year after they finish their first year. And, I would say to families, if all of those are high, then you have a university that is going to be a very good investment. And whether your sons and daughters wind up going straight into industry afterwards, or if they wind up going to graduate school, they're going to be very well prepared. If they're going to graduate school, they will have worked closely with faculty. They will have very solid letters of recommendation. They will have had some industry experience, so they'll know why they're going to graduate school. They'll be able to write a very compelling application. And if they're going into industry, they'll have the industry experience. And again, they'll have the letters of recommendation, and they'll be well positioned for that. So that was the impetus behind the Launchpad rankings. And then when we sat down and started doing the analysis, we were insistent that we not do this based on rumor or innuendo. We wanted to use objective, verifiable data that we could get from the public data sets. And there are, in the US, the universities are required to submit certain types of data on several times a year to the US Department of Education. So we were able to trawl through that data and use that to drive the computations.
So actually, the EducationWorld Launchpad, America's best universities for undergrad education, they are like a big disruptor in the rankings ecosystem. Correct? I mean, because it's
absolutely
disrupted the entire traditional parameters, which one thought was research citations. The entire subset of parameters.
Absolutely. And, because so much of the traditional rankings felt like a members club where the high ranked people say very complimentary things about the other high ranked people and they defend their positions at the top of the ranking. And now Launchpad comes around and we don't care about what they think of each other. We just want to look at the data. And this looking at the data, as with anyone, I mean, you could say, compare this to, you go to your doctor who says you're doing fine, and then now suddenly you look at the blood work and you're not doing fine. This is like, we wanted to get beyond that surface, everybody's saying good things about the universities you've already heard of, and actually look at the blood work and see what is really happening here. This too becomes important when students really need to, when they're sending in their applications, if the big challenge is to find if you want to maximize your chances of getting into somewhere good, you really need to be looking not at the place where everybody is already lining up. You want to look at a ranking system that shows you the underappreciated assets, the places that, if you have a school that in the Launchpad rankings is very high and whose admission selectivity, say, is such that you have a good chance of getting in, then that is a much better school to focus on than schools where the admission selectivity is 3 and 4%.
What's been the reaction? Because, like I said, it's a big disruptor in the rankings ecosystem. What's been the reaction of to the rankings in the US, in America?
Oh, it's been fun to.
It's the ones which are not there in the usual rankings league tables.
Yeah, no, it's been fun to watch because there are some universities like Kettering University who came out on the #1 ranking, and I know there's an interview with the president, Robert McMahon, in EducationWorld. You see someone like him who finally says, yes, I feel validated. Yes, people are finally paying attention. We've been doing this for years and years, and now we're being noticed. Or you look at universities who maybe have not been on anyone's radar are suddenly being noticed. And again, they feel appreciated because these are all mission-driven institutions who are focused on doing what they believe is best for students, and now to be acknowledged that they're actually succeeding feels very good. The universities who, like my former university, Stanford University, who is not at the diamond tier and not at the platinum tier, when you tell them, okay, you're not in the top 1 or 2 categories, but you're in the 3rd or lower, they are more likely to be dismissive because we don't care because we're already famous and this isn't going to impact our bottom line, so go away. But it really is the universities that historically haven't been valued that really are the golden diamond opportunities for these students. Those are the ones who have been very receptive here. And I really think that we're going to see an increasing number of students going to these universities. And I think we'll see universities begin to realize that rather than chasing something like their endowment, which is very hard to change, why not focus on who's actually doing the teaching? Why not focus on the experience that they're giving the undergraduates? These are things that are in their control, their power to change. I mean, that's one part of the wonderful thing about the Launchpad rankings is these are things that universities can change. If they understand that this is where the value is, these are easy places for them to make investments. Much easier to do this than to worry about your citation index, where you have, that even if you tell your professors, okay, everybody needs to start publishing twice as much this year, it will take a long time before you can bend that curve. So, we will see what happens.
Yeah. So how does, because starting to trust another ranking system requires also a parental and student mindset change. So that's a bit, it's a bit difficult and it's time consuming. But I think that, would you agree with me that, these five parameters which you have said that, teaching focus, experiential education, economic mobility, retention rate, are the defining parameters of undergrad education excellence, and parents and students should understand that this is what defines if you want a high quality undergrad education experience.
Absolutely. And I think if people just sit and think about it from first principles, they'll appreciate that this is correct. The part of sort of the unlearning that people need to do to get rid of the false beliefs they have is to take that step back and look at, okay, why did these other ranking systems come about? What was the motivation there? And is that what I'm interested in, or is Launchpad and what it worries about what I'm most interested in? I mean, one of the challenges too that people have is there's a tremendous difference between graduate school experience and undergraduate experience. So many families will have had, whether the parents or aunt or uncle or someone went to the US to do a PhD, or maybe they went to do a master's degree and they went to some large state university where they had a good experience. They might say, oh, going to the University of Michigan, this was wonderful. This was a great place to be. And yes, it's a great place to be if you're a graduate student in a department that wants you. But if you're an undergraduate and you're an international student and you're shut out from participating in research and you're not going to get internships until maybe your final year and you have all of these disadvantages, that is not such a good experience. And the problem is that because someone who went there and they said, I was great, I had a great time there, but where they went as a grad student is a fundamentally different place than where you went as an undergraduate. And just getting people to understand those differences is a challenge. And, of course, people don't like to suddenly wake up and realize that what they had believed was not necessarily accurate. It's very uncomfortable. So that's why getting parents to start early, because if you've been sleepwalking until your child is in grade 11, and then now you think, okay, this is just going to be a 6 to 12 month effort, and someone is telling you, no, you've thought about this all wrong. These things, your targets shouldn't be your targets. That can be very upsetting. If you can get people to start thinking in grade 7 and 8, well, maybe part of their brain can still be fixated on Ivy League, and part of their brain can be thinking about what we're talking about. And by the time they get to grade 11, they'll understand the advantages. And I mean, the irony of it all is if students build their profiles the way we've been talking about, that's going to improve their chances of getting into any university they apply to. what I would like to see is students follow my advice, get into several Ivy League schools and into several highly ranked Launchpad schools, and then make what I would consider to be the intelligent decision and to decline the Ivy League schools and to go to the school that has the highest Launchpad ranking. Ultimately the parents and the students can make the decision, but I would argue that our advice is going to give them the best possible outcome because it will give them the widest possible choice set. And hopefully they'll also have the wisdom to make the right choice.
Yes, and I think you have a ace up your sleeves. I mean, you're coming out with a book, a guide
Yes.
book to
Thank you
change.
for bringing this up. So this is exactly, so you write the Launchpad guide, the Launchpad rankings, and this is explaining what universities people should look at. And it occurred to me that, okay, that's useful for the conversation with the universities about what they should be thinking of as important. But for families, they need something more than just looking at a table. They really need to understand how to think about this and really how to crack the code on the American system. And so the Launchpad guide is exactly this. And so there I'm taking my 27 years at Stanford University, my 40 years almost now working in the industry. And, so the subtitle is An Insider's Playbook for Indian Students Choosing American Colleges. And, it talks about the mindset reset, the questions people should be asking, especially if you think of undergraduate education is going to be an investment of up to 2 crore. People really need to think seriously about how they're doing that. How do you understand the American system? How do you prepare strategically for your application, the sorts of things we were just talking about? And then also too, some of the more practical matters of understanding cost structures and what universities publish and even what their financial aid offers are and what you can negotiate, what you can't negotiate, really getting people to understand that. And it is intended to be something that is very readable. In the book, I walk people through both these sorts of abstract conversations we've had, but there are a lot of practical examples drawn from students I have known over the years and who really help families understand why something that seems to be good might not be quite as good as it seems, and what sorts of choices are really important and what the long-term implications of those choices are. And that book will be available soon. We'll be launching that sometime this spring together with EducationWorld. Very happy to be working together on that. And, as I would say, people can find that book at their local bookstore, any place books are sold, and it will be available on Amazon India as well. So,
Ray, to sum up, what would be your top 5, as it were, tips, advice for Indian students right now? Like I said, this is that time of the year for American university undergrad admission success.
yeah, absolutely. So start early. You can never start too early. Don't just look at what everyone else is looking at. Understand that there's a lot of bad information out there, and what many people believe to be true isn't. So do your own research. I would say understand that people admit portfolios and not transcripts. So more important than worrying about the particular things that you're getting as grades in your course or your board exam scores, really worry about building a compelling profile that shows, what you need to have at the end of the day for success. Grades will be important. Test scores will be important. What you'll have much more control over, letters of recommendation. Really cultivate good letters of recommendation. Anytime you're working with someone, make sure that you consider them as someone who might write for you. And if you develop a relationship with them, then ask them to write for you. And the other thing is focus. Really demonstrate that you are willing to go outside of your school. And no matter how many opportunities your school has, You want to show that you're not limiting yourself to what is being handed to you at school, but you're willing to look outside. So go beyond what is available at school, try different things, but show focus so that you're not just, no one wants to see somebody who's taken the first year of 6 different languages. You may try a couple of languages, but find one that you're actually going to put the work in, and they want to see that you spend the time and the effort to develop your talents. Beyond that, I would say really think about college as a consumer decision. So if you were going to, if you're going to a store and you're going to buy a pair of shoes, there are plenty of shoes that might look very pretty or very attractive, or it might be the brand that everybody is talking about. But unless they feel comfortable, unless you actually put them on and can walk around, at the end of the day, that's not going to work. You need, college is not a short sprint. It's a long, slow march, and you need to find the things that are going to be the most comfortable. The goal isn't to get into a good college. The goal is to be successful at the college you go to and position yourself for success in life beyond college. So keep your eye on the long horizon, because that's what you're working towards. And everything in between is just a step. And, so getting, if you know that you want to ultimately go to Harvard Business School, you might think, okay, the best way to go to Harvard Business School is to go to Harvard College as an undergraduate. And the answer is no, no, no. They take almost no one into their business school. The best way to get into Harvard Business School is to go somewhere else and do really well. So, you need to figure out, going to Harvard Business School, why are you doing that? If it's just because you want the HBS degree, that's not going to lead to success the way that you will have if you want to go into some sort of field that is going to require that you have that credential. There is an interesting article that I wrote in Forbes, this company SignalFire, who's a big investor in technology startups. They found that much more important as a predictor of success than the universities that people go to are the companies that they wind up working for in the first year, the first job or 2 jobs outside of university. And especially if you're going into artificial intelligence, they talk about having work experience from these 5 or 6 companies far more valuable than degrees from these 5 or 6 universities. And so students tend to focus too narrowly, and they're only looking at the next step. They really need to look at the long path. So start earlier than you think you should, focus later than you think you should. And if you do that, even if you do nothing else, you will have a much greater chance of success. So, my short 2 advices are start early and stay late. I mean, really have the long-term perspective
in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Great, Ray. I think thank you for a very enlightening conversation. And all of us in India are looking forward to the Launchpad guidebook. I think that's going to be like our Education World Launchpad rankings. I think that'll be a big disruptor in the higher education foreign university counseling segment, which will, bust all the myths and give the real truths and put the real focus on what really matters in undergrad education.
No, I certainly hope it does. We always say here that the success, when you look at the big companies in America, we're having a lot of success because we're getting a lot of great people from India coming over and either creating these companies or running them. I want to make sure that we get a steady stream of these people coming to replace them. And anything I can do to help the families in India find the right colleges and universities in America is something that I'm definitely happy to do. And I'm glad to be working with EducationWorld to make this possible. I encourage everyone to buy the book, and I look forward to seeing people online.
Yes. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Suya.